Welcome, nature detectives. I'm Conrad. I'm an outdoor educator with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation at Letchworth State Park, and today I have a nature mystery for you. I found a plant on the forest floor that's growing in a kind of unusual way. I think we can use some nature clues to figure out what kind of plant this is and what it can tell us about the future of this forest. First nature clue that we notice about this plant is how tall it is. If I hold it up straight, the tip of it is over my head while I'm down here on my knees. So it's pretty tall compared to a lot of the other kind of plants that we'd find around here in the forest. Second nature clue. Do you notice how the branches coming off to either side from the main stem come off in a symmetrical pattern? Symmetry exactly the same on either side. A plant scientist might call that opposite branching, as opposed to alternate branching, which most kind of plants have. Opposite branching is kind of unusual. There are only a few kinds of plants around here that have this opposite symmetrical branching. And the third nature clue, take a close look at these beautiful buds on the tips of these twigs. These are tiny baby leaves that soon will open up and unfurl into big, beautiful food-generating leaves for this plant. You notice how nice and rich red they are? If I gently poke one on the end of my finger, it's pointed, but I wouldn't call it really sharp. Some kinds of plants that look like this have really sharp, pointy buds. But this one is, it's pointed, but it doesn't hurt if I push down with my finger. Let's put all those nature clues together. We have a pointed but not sharp bud that's beautiful bright red on opposite branching twigs on a plant that's over my head when I'm down on my knees on the ground. This must be a young red maple tree. Red maple is a super important tree to this forest because as the aspens and birches and pioneer species start to get older and die, these red maples will take advantage of the extra sunlight left by those fallen trees, take off and fill in, spread out, and cover the roof of the forest. And that's really what makes a forest after all, is great big wide trees that not only seal in some of the moisture, some of the water that's useful for all kinds of plants and animals and fungi and living things, but also keeps the soil from washing away in the rain and shades the ground. A forest can be a kind of a quiet, dark, shady place, and that's because of all the big trees. Trees like oaks and sugar maples and red maples are really important growing up in mature forests. They can get very, very old and cover the forest floor for a really long time. These kinds of species, the red maples and sugar maples and oaks, they are what a forest scientist would call climax tree species. They're a sign that a forest is mature, is pretty old, has had a couple of young tree species come through, like birches and aspens, and now is having some bigger trees fill in and start to develop a real roof, a real canopy on top of that forest. Red maple trees are super important trees for us human beings too. We can make boxes out of their wood, and their sap, even though it's not as sweet as sugar maple sap, can be used to make maple syrup. But this red maple tree is unusual because of its height. It's pretty small for a tree, it's a young tree, but most trees around here in this forest don't even make it to be this tall. Most red maple trees get to be about this tall before white-tailed deer come and eat them. Maple trees are really delicious, soft, wonderful leaves that deer and rabbits really love to eat, and especially the white-tailed deer absolutely eat all of the maple trees that they can find. So this one is inside this fence that I'm sitting inside right now, this cage. But this isn't a cage designed to keep something in. This is a cage designed to keep something out. This is a white-tailed deer exclosure, keeping the deer out of this very small patch of woods. But already inside this cage, you can see red maples growing, some blackberries growing, some herb level plants growing way down low, like geraniums and sensitive plants that deer would otherwise eat. It's really an interesting science experiment that was set up by an Eagle Scout a few years ago. And just over the last couple years, we've already seen a huge, drastic change in the kinds of plants that will live inside this exclosure as opposed to outside. Outside the exclosure, we really hardly ever see maple trees of this height. All the maple trees we see are either this tall or really, really old. And when those old maple trees do reach the end of their lives and fall down and die, they're going to need some young ones to come and take their place. With white-tailed deer eating all these very young maple trees before they can grow to even this height and take over for the older trees, could be a really big problem in the future, say 80 or 90 years from now, when all those big trees have fallen down and there are no young trees to come and replace them. Now that said, there are a lot of maple trees sprouting up in Letchworth State Park and around western New York. If you really want to have an adventure, try to find some young maple trees in your neighborhood. And especially look out for some that are about 3 feet tall or so. That's a really important height because it means that that tree has made it past the height when deer usually snip them off when they've just sprouted, but they're not out of the danger zone where the tree is too high for the deer to feed from it. It's the most sensitive period of the tree's life, and it's the time that they need our protection the most. If you really want to put your nature detective skills to the test, come and try to find some trees of this size in Letchworth State Park. If you find some, certainly let us know about it in the comments below, because like I say, it's kind of unusual to find maple trees of this height anywhere, and in Letchworth State Park is no exception. Well, thank you so much for joining me for today's Nature Mystery. If you have any questions about maple trees, please put a comment in the comments section below the video. Share this video with your friends to put their nature detective skills to the test. And as always, like Letchworth State Park's Facebook page to stay tuned for more nature mysteries.